Hi everyone, welcome to Kings and Queens Chess Academy's YouTube channel. I'm Grandmaster Magesh Panchanathan, and today we're going to continue looking into Paul Morphy's great games. We have a series, for those who have not seen the other videos, of some of the best games, some miniature games, some great attacking games of Paul Morphy. And we're going to continue on that series, and today we're actually going to look at one of the most important games that Paul Morphy has played, and he's probably the most famous game as well. This one is called as the Opera game, and it's rightly called so because this game was played at an opera house in Paris, and this was between Paul Morphy and two amateur players. It was the Duke of Brunswick and Count Isouard, who are the two players who were actually playing together. They were teaming up against Paul Morphy. Let's jump into this game, but before we start the moves, I want to say a few things about the game. I've mentioned this in my other videos about Paul Morphy. There are a few things that I really like about his games, and I want you, viewers, to look at this game with those perspectives, right? The first thing is Paul Morphy was great at bringing his pieces together, so there was amazing coordination between his pieces. If you look at his games, you will see that all those pieces are doing something or the other. That's fantastic. The second thing is my personal favorite, that is Paul Morphy used tempo phenomenally for his time. At the time when he was playing, he was way ahead of his time. I've mentioned this several times in our video series. He was just way ahead of what he was doing, and he was using tempo, which is very simple concept now. That is, you just develop and you do things in a multiple way, right? You don't just bring your knight out. You don't just bring your bishop out. You bring your bishop out and you threaten something. You bring your knight out and you have a plan to do something. So his opponents always had to, react more than they doing something. They're always reacting to what Morphy was doing. And the last one is he was extremely aggressive. He was a fantastic finisher of the game. When his pieces were ready, it was unbelievable. He would just unleash everything on you and finish off. Sometimes in his games, he's left with only one piece because he has thrown every other piece at the black king and eventually finished it. All right, let's jump into the game. E4, E5, knight f3, and d6. Again, there are so many moves here. Knight c6 is common, and knight c6 and d6 are the most common moves in this position, and d6 could lead to what we call as a Philidor's defense. So if white plays d4 and if black plays knight to d7, probably the Philidor's defense. I used to play this for several years. I would say it's a tad bit passive for black, but look at what happened in the game. Morphy does go d4, and instead of playing knight to d7 or any normal move to just save the pawn that's under attack, black players decide to go on the offensive. They're probably talking to each other thinking, you know what, let's set a simple trap for Paul Morphy. Let's pin the knight, right? So when two pieces that Morphy has are attacking one of them, there's only one defender. The usual idea is to add a defender or trade off the pieces, right? In this case, black is saying, not that arrow. Black is saying, I'm going to neutralize one of your attacker by putting you in a pin. Fair enough? Except, after pawn captures pawn, black is in a little bit of a spot here. Because if black captures the pawn back, Morphy's queen opened up to this queen, which is very convenient because now the queen trade achieves two things for white. White queen, which was supposed to be the reason why the knight cannot move, is gone. The second thing is black's castling is also gone. So this is like a win-win situation. Morphy would go ahead and pick up that pawn and probably just be winning in this position. But of course, the players talked with each other probably and figured out that this is not a great way to go forward. And they decided to get rid of the knight first. Makes sense, yeah? Because the knight is the one that can actually capture the black pawn when the black pawn goes to e5. So they're like, let's do an intermediate capture. So let's take the knight on f3 first before we take the pawn on e5. So the queen captures and pawn captures. So this is where everything starts beautifully. You see that nothing much has happened. Both sides have exactly symmetrical pawn structure. Only the queen is out for Morphy, right? From here on to the end, Morphy's play is beautiful. Again, it's harmony, right? Every single piece that he brings out, and it's just fantastic to see how his pieces work together. And they do it with a tempo, right? Let's start with the first move, bishop c4. Well, the famous The famous scholar's mate is at stake. White's about to checkmate black, and black defends. I would say you should pause the video and try to find the best move for white here. Hopefully you found that great move. Morphy found a brilliant double attack, a queen shifting to the other side and switching his angle, but still putting pressure on that f pawn. He's also picking up this one. So at this point, white's already probably winning because black cannot save both the pawns. Only one pawn can be saved, and black naturally saves the pawn near the king. The reason, of course, is that if something like this is played, Morphy has a simple checkmate in 2. That leads to a checkmate, and that's basically game over. So black played queen e7. Guarding this one, it was actually a smart move because black is actually reducing the damage here, right? So if white probably takes this pawn and thinks, oh, you know what, I can just win this rook. Again, I would recommend our users to pause the video and try to see if black can find a way to save the queen. Save the rook. Yes, that is one way. Queen to b4 check actually trades a queen. So once a queen is gone, there is no one really attacking that rook because the queen has to capture the queen, right? So queen captures, bishop captures, and maybe c3. Now white is up a pawn and probably winning this again. Not a problem at all. But Morphy was in no mood to just, win a pawn and go to an endgame. He realized his position is way better than to cash in on just one pawn. So he plays again a very, very simple move, but does so many things in one level. Knight to c3. Again, simple but brilliant. What does it do? It suddenly seemed to have blocked this diagonal where Morphy's opponent was planning to trade queens when this pawn was captured. Yeah, so very subtle. It seems to have guarded this pawn that this knight was attacking. Didn't have a chance to capture it because there was no time. But Morphy's knight move brings the knight out to the center, stops queen b4 check, protects the pawn on e4. And this is the kind of play I'm talking about. It's very, very subtle, and you might think, it's not a big deal. But guess what? If you play 10 moves like this, it starts adding up. And that's exactly what Morphy does. Black plays c6. Very simple, subtle move. Bishop comes out, but actually puts a small pin on this knight, making it more difficult, right? And now black's position is actually very awkward. The bishop is not moving because the queen's blocking, yeah? And the knight doesn't have a clear way to go because the queen is supposed to save this one. So if knight goes to d7, it kind of blocks that own path. And knight going to a6, of course, can always run into bishop takes a6 and ruining the pawn structure. So black decided, enough is enough. Let's shout or counter attack, right? Let's go back and say, you know what, enough is enough. Let's push white pieces back. So b5 would have been a nice move if black had castled, or if the bishop was out, if the king was safe. Would have been a great move, but except black has done none of those things. Black's pieces are still completely out of shape, out of play. They've not even gotten out. And at the same time, black is trying to attack white. So Morphy realizes his opportunity and launches a beautiful sacrifice. Knight captures b5. Usually it's a bad idea because I have a knight which is worth 3 points. I will only end up winning the 2 pawns, which is worth 2 points. But Morphy's idea, again, you will see is how beautiful his pieces work together. Bishop captures b5 check. Oh, so now you see the first idea. The sacrifice has completely opened the diagonal and exposed the black king. And Morphy is using that to attack the black king. So black play knight to d7. Now you can start pitying black's pieces. One is pinned to the king. Another one is pinned to the queen. And they're caught in this amazing crossfire between the two bishops. So Morphy makes another subtle but beautiful move. One of my favorite moves in this game, even though there's a lot of cool stuff in this game. This move, castle long. Again, I like to look at these simple moves which do more than one. The king is castled. The king has gone to safety. The rook has actually come out to the open file, right? So it's not like I'm just doing one thing. Morphy could have castled kingside. And you might have seen that, oh yes, he did a great job of castling. He could have played rook to d1. And you might have said, yes, good move because the rook got out to the open file. But castling long, again, subtle and strong move. The rook that got out is also going to be focusing on this particular knight under attack. So the poor black rook had to go to d8. And the minute you see this position, you can't think about, I mean, you can't stop thinking about the fact that a knight on c7 would checkmate this king in a smothered checkmate, which would be cool, but Morphy doesn't have a knight. So after rook d8, the only piece that's left out is this one. So you might think that's, you know, Morphy's not so great. We keep talking about harmony, he still leaves something out. Yeah? Nope. It comes right in. Rook captures d7, rook captures d7, and rook d1. And at this point, you have to admire the fact that every single white piece is out and has done something already. A knight went to c3 and it went for a sacrifice. So that knight's gone. This rook came to d1 and it actually went for a trade on d7, right? And the next rook is here. Now what basically Morphy is doing is saying, you know what? 4 active pieces against not many. I would say 1.5 maybe the knight. But the biggest problem for black is playing down a rook and a bishop, right? We call this the relative value of pieces. Even though this rook is worth 5 points, in this position, it's worth 0 points, right? I mean, you can have, I might as well put a queen in there and nothing would change, yeah? So Morphy's opponent, they're going for a last ditch effort to trade queens, saying, you know what, let's get off this queen, then hopefully we can breathe, even though there's attack. So anyone who has sacrificed and played an attacking game by now should know that you cannot trade queens when you're attacking, particularly when you have sacrifice material. That's just going to put you at a worse position because your attack will just fade away. But Morphy spots a brilliant combination to finish the game here. It starts with bishop d7, knight d7. I would recommend our viewers to pause the video here and try to find a checkmate in 2. All right, hopefully you guys found the checkmate. This rook going to d8 would be a nice checkmate, but the knight's blocking. So in a classic deflection theme, Morphy goes queen to b8 check. Now it looks like a bad move at first thought because the knight can capture the queen, but then he follows up with rook to d8 checkmate. So the only 2 pieces that white has on the board is that bishop and that rook. Every other piece was developed and used in a very, very optimal way by Paul Morphy. Hope you guys enjoyed this game. It's, again, one of my favorites. It's just a way to explain how you should develop your pieces, how you should develop them with purpose, and how you should go crush your opponent when they're all ready. All right, thank you.